Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In a city where tension between police and military forces is palpable, Sergeant Marcus Reynolds, a police officer with an impulsive temperament, is assigned to joint patrols with the local army. For weeks, he has felt a growing animosity from his superior, Lieutenant Colonel Victoria Hayes, a rigorous woman, respected and feared for her implacable authority. Their last exchange, during a routine check, had been explosive, accusations of negligence, threats of punishment, and a verbal confrontation that left Marcus seething with rage. That day, a simple emergency call about a robbery in progress would turn the tide. As tensions mounted on the ground, Marcus, overcome by frustration and a sense of injustice he'd been carrying for months, made a rash move. He pointed his gun at Victoria, in front of his stunned colleagues. The moment barely hung in the air, before the chain of command made an immediate decision. Within seconds, Marcus was disarmed, handcuffed, and escorted from the station. His behavior cost him not only his job, but also his police career and his reputation throughout the city. But that was only the beginning. Behind this impulsive act lay a more complex truth: internal pressures, military and police secrets, and an investigation that would reveal that not everyone was as innocent as they claimed. The afternoon sun cast its rays on the police station of Riverside, a city where every street corner seemed to bear the weight of past conflicts. Marcus Reynolds, 32, a police officer for 10 years, entered the lobby of the station with a mixture of anger and fatigue. Files were piling up on his desk, but it wasn't the paperwork that tormented him, it was the constant tension with his superior, Lieutenant Colonel Victoria Hayes. Victoria wasn't just strict, she seemed to be watching Marcus's every move with constant suspicion. Every mistake, every delay, every hesitation was singled out. Marcus, on the other hand, had always been loyal, but he felt his efforts were never enough. That day, a simple weapons and protocol check turned ugly. Marcus had reported a minor issue with his equipment. Victoria, in her usual style, accused him of incompetence in front of the entire team. The tone rose, the words became sharp, and Marcus felt anger boil inside him. "You never understand anything, Reynolds," Victoria screamed. "I'm just doing my job," Marcus replied, his voice trembling but firm. His colleagues watched in silence. Marcus felt an uncontrollable rage rising. He was tired of always being belittled, of never being acknowledged. In a desperate reflex, his trembling hands grabbed his service weapon. "Back off, Hayes," he shouted, his face red with anger. The air seemed to freeze. The other police officers hesitated, shocked. Victoria, unperturbed despite the immediate danger, raised her hands slightly, with an almost icy calm. This impulsive and thoughtless gesture sealed Marcus's fate. Within seconds, he was disarmed by his colleagues, handcuffed, and led out of the police station. Shame and incomprehension were written all over his face. His career had just collapsed, but a deeper unease washed over him. He knew this confrontation was only the tip of an iceberg. Behind this tension between Marcus and Victoria lay darker secrets. Internal rivalries, political pressures, and perhaps even manipulation that went beyond mere military discipline. Marcus was escorted out of the police station as his colleagues watched in amazement. The sirens of patrol cars wailed in the distance, but for him, the world seemed to have stopped. Every step he took away from his post was a step into the unknown. His career, which he had built with diligence and sacrifice, had just collapsed in a matter of seconds. Outside, whispers were beginning to spread. Civilians on the sidewalk whispered, some curiously, others judgmentally. The word robbery was already escaping from mouth to mouth, distorting the reality of the event. Marcus felt a mixture of humiliation and anger. Not only had he lost his job, but his reputation was now in tatters. Back home in his small Riverside apartment, he collapsed on the couch. Memories of his youth and the sacrifices he'd made to become a police officer mingled with the rage still boiling inside him. His thoughts turned to Victoria. Why had she always been so relentless? Was it really a matter of discipline, or was there something darker behind her behavior? The phone rang suddenly, pulling him from his stupor. It was Derek Lawson, a former colleague and confidant. "Marcus, are you sure you didn't make a mistake?" Derek asked cautiously. "I was just reacting." "I didn't want to," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. Derek hesitated, then added, "Listen, it's not just your gesture. There are strange stories circulating about Victoria. Some say she's keeping secrets, and will stop at nothing to keep them." These words struck Marcus like a bolt of lightning. What kind of secrets could Victoria be hiding? And why had she pushed him to this point of irreversible action? A new, more determined anger took root within him. He no longer wanted to just defend himself, he wanted to understand. That night, Marcus made a choice. His police career might be over, but he would delve into the mysteries of military and police power, seek the truth, and discover what Victoria Hayes and her network had been protecting for so long. His fall was only the beginning of a fight bigger, more dangerous, and perhaps more revealing than anything he had imagined. The next day, Marcus awoke with a newfound determination. His old position would no longer welcome him, but he refused to stand by. Arming himself with patience and courage, he began investigating Victoria Hayes, her recent decisions, and the precinct's internal affairs. He contacted former colleagues, informants, and even a few civilians who had dealt with Victoria. Gradually, a disturbing picture emerged. Victoria was not only a strict superior, she seemed to be manipulating certain files, suppressing investigations, and favoring certain officers over others. During a clandestine meeting in a discreet cafe with Derek Lawson, Marcus learned a first piece of the puzzle. "Marcus, you should know that Victoria has always been protected by high-ranking figures in the military and police. Some say she's covering up operations that aren't entirely legal." "What do you mean by not legal?" Marcus asked, his heart pounding. "Missing files, stopped investigations, pressure on witnesses, look at Derek." These revelations aroused a mixture of fear and anger in Marcus. He understood that his impulsive action, pointing his gun at Victoria, had been partly a reaction to tensions he hadn't yet fully understood. But now he saw that behind his superior's rigid facade lay a complex web of manipulation and secrets. Determined to dig deeper, Marcus began collecting evidence. He went to the city library to consult the internal affairs archives, combed through reports and minutes, and began noting every inconsistency and discrepancy. Each document he examined brought him one step closer to a dangerous truth. But Marcus also knew he was no longer protected by his uniform. Every step he took to reveal these secrets could put him in danger. He had to be cautious, calculate his moves, and choose his allies carefully. This nascent investigation promised to turn not only his life upside down, but also that of Victoria Hayes, and to reveal truths that no one in the police system had wanted to expose until now. Marcus spent the night poring over the files he'd retrieved. Each report seemed innocuous on its own, but when he juxtaposed them, a disturbing pattern emerged. Several internal investigations had been abruptly halted, complaints ignored, and officers inexplicably disciplined. His heart raced when he came across a particular file, a confidential report on a joint military operation with the police, classified as highly sensitive. The document stated that Victoria Hayes covered the disappearance of critical evidence, and that some witnesses had been intimidated into remaining silent. Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline. It was the evidence he needed to understand why Victoria was acting so harshly towards him and other colleagues. But he also knew that having this file put him in danger. He decided to contact Elena Carter, a former investigative journalist turned internal affairs consultant with a reputation for integrity and discretion. "Elena, I have something that could change everything," Marcus said when they met in a secluded parking lot. "Show me," she replied, her eyes piercing her interlocutor as if to gauge his sincerity. When he handed her the file, Elena quickly skimmed through the pages. Her eyes widened, then narrowed in concentration. "Marcus, if this falls into the wrong hands, you could not only lose your reputation, but put your life in danger. Victoria Hayes is protected, and what she did is worse than you realize." Marcus nodded, determined despite his fear. He knew his career was already over, and remaining passive was no longer an option. With Elena's help, he could expose the truth, but every step would be risky. As they spoke, a shiver ran through Marcus. For several minutes now, he'd felt like he was being watched. The dark, seemingly deserted streets of Riverside might already be hiding the eyes of Victoria or her allies. Every movement became a dance with danger, and Marcus knew the game had just begun. Marcus and Elena spent the morning developing a discreet plan to secure the evidence and verify every document in the case. They knew that the slightest mistake could alert Victoria and her network, and once detected, their lives would be in danger. As they were about to leave the cafe where they regularly met, Marcus felt a presence behind them. A man in a dark suit, his face partially hidden by sunglasses, was watching them from the neighboring terrace. He seemed too attentive to be a mere passerby. "Marcus," Elena whispered, lightly squeezing his arm. "Yes, I saw it. Let's stay calm. We can't panic," he replied, his voice tense. They went their separate ways to avoid being followed, but the threat was clear. Victoria or her allies knew someone was interested in his sensitive files. Marcus felt his adrenaline rising, but he knew he had to move on. Back in his apartment, he reread the confidential report for the umpteenth time. Every page revealed a multi-layered web of manipulation and corruption, intimidation of officers, concealment of evidence in sensitive investigations, and even misappropriation of military resources. It all added up. Victoria wasn't just strict, she was protecting something colossal. Elena, for her part, proposed a riskier but effective plan. "We need to expose Victoria, but keep our anonymity at first. We can publish a series of articles under a pseudonym and provoke a formal internal investigation." "What if she finds out it's us?" Marcus asked, tension in his voice. "So we will have to be prepared to face the consequences, and they could be serious." This conversation cemented their alliance. Marcus understood he no longer had a choice. The truth had to come out, even if it meant risking his safety. That night, as he stared at the ceiling of his apartment, Marcus sensed another presence, a car that had long been parked in front of the building, its headlights shining into his window. The game had just taken a much more dangerous turn. Victoria wasn't just a rigid opponent, she was becoming an enemy willing to do anything to protect her secrets. Marcus and Elena decided it was time to take action. Their goal was simple but risky: infiltrate the police station's secure server to copy additional evidence and launch their first controlled leak to the press. As night fell, Marcus crept near the rear entrance of the police station, using his knowledge of the internal security systems. Elena, sitting back in her car, guided him by radio, every word carefully chosen to avoid arousing suspicion. Alarm temporarily deactivated. "You have 3 minutes, Marcus." "Understood," he replied, breathless. Inside, he found the main server and began copying the files to an encrypted drive. Each file further revealed the extent of the corruption. Victoria wasn't just aware of the internal affairs cover-ups, she orchestrated them. Marcus felt anger rising, but also a strange satisfaction. He finally had evidence he could use against her. As he finished, footsteps sounded behind him. His heart raced. He turned slowly and saw a guard officer, whom he vaguely knew. The man looked at him suspiciously. "What are you doing here at this hour?" asked the officer. Marcus was surprised. "Emergency systems check. Victoria asked me to control access." Hurry up," replied the officer before walking away. Marcus let out a breath, but he knew the danger wasn't over. Once outside, Elena was waiting for him, anxious but determined. "We have the files. We'll publish the first part tomorrow, just enough to trigger an investigation without revealing our identities." This Marcus. The next day, several local and national media outlets began reporting the initial reports. Journalists spoke of irregularities in internal investigations and serious failings in the chain of command. Victoria, at the center of the storm, remained silent, but the tension was palpable. For Marcus, this first success was a victory, but he knew Victoria wouldn't stand by. Every future move would be scrutinized, every action could trigger retaliation, and the fight to expose the truth had only just begun. The release of the files had sent panic through the police station and the military. Victoria Hayes, previously calm and impassive, was finally showing signs of anger. Her strategy meetings dragged on, her assistants trembled at every order, and strict instructions were sent to all staff: find the leak and neutralize the infiltrator. Marcus quickly felt the consequences of their initial action. Colleagues he believed to be neutral began to avoid him, some whispering behind his back. Anonymous calls threatening Elena became frequent, causing her to move cautiously. One night, as he was leaving his apartment, Marcus saw a figure waiting for him at the street corner, a tall man, masked by a dark coat, who seemed to be watching his every move. Marcus quickened his pace, but the man followed closely behind him. Fortunately, he managed to shake off his threat by darting into a crowded subway, but fear had set in. The next day, Elena informed him of some worrying news. "Marcus, I got a message. They know someone has access to the files. They're talking about you indirectly. Victoria will stop at nothing. We knew it was coming. We have to stay one step ahead." Marcus replied, his jaw clenched. In the following days, they set up a secure communications system and began planning the next step, releasing a second wave of even more incriminating evidence, while remaining anonymous. But Victoria, a skilled strategist, did not remain passive. She began using her influence to create a hunt for the traitor, manipulating certain officials and journalists to cover her tracks. Marcus then understood the magnitude of the danger. This was no longer simply a battle for the truth, but a strategic confrontation where every move could cost them their lives. Victoria's response would not be just professional, it could become personal. Tensions rose when Marcus realized Victoria might have informants everywhere, even among her closest former colleagues. Every conversation, every move, every contact became a risk. And yet, the truth remained their only weapon. Marcus and Elena worked tirelessly to gather irrefutable evidence. After several nights of combing through documents, videos, and testimonies, they finally discovered an internal correspondence from Victoria which exposed his schemes to cover up sensitive cases and intimidate witnesses. It was the key piece they needed to launch a massive revelation. They decided to meet a freelance journalist, known for his integrity, to hand over the evidence. The meeting was arranged in a deserted parking lot, out of sight. "It's all there. It's irrefutable," Marcus said, holding out the encrypted file. "All right. I'll post this carefully, but in a powerful way." "No one will know it's you," replied the journalist, his face serious. As they left the parking lot, Marcus felt a presence behind them. Before they could react, a car blocked their path. Masked men got out, surrounding Marcus and Elena. "Did you really think you could get away with this?" a familiar voice rumbled. Victoria Hayes suddenly appeared at the car door. Her icy calm contrasted with the palpable threat. "Victoria," Marcus whispered, realizing they had been trapped. Victoria smiled, an icy smile. "You have courage, but the truth comes at a price. And tonight, you will learn what that means." Marcus and Elena exchanged a quick glance. They weren't prepared for a direct physical confrontation, but they knew they had to stay calm and think quickly. Every second counted. In this extreme tension, Marcus realized something: Victoria, despite all her power and network, had laid a fault in his plan. A mistake they could exploit if only they could hold out for a few more minutes. This trap revealed a truth: the battle to expose Victoria would not only be intellectual, it would be a struggle for survival. And Marcus understood that this confrontation would forever change the course of their investigation, and perhaps their lives. Flanked by Victoria's men, Marcus and Elena realized they only had seconds to act. Elena whispered to Marcus. "The car has an electronic security system, I can disable it, but that won't give us much time." Marcus nodded. He had to take a chance. While Elena quickly fiddled with an electronic box, Marcus watched the armed men. Moments later, there was a soft click and the rear door swung open, creating a gap. Without hesitation, Marcus and Elena slipped out of the car and ran toward the shadows of an adjacent alley. Victoria's men fired a few shots into the air, but they were too fast and coordinated to be stopped. Hearts pounding, they took refuge in an abandoned building, catching their breath. "We had a lucky escape," Marcus murmured, still out of breath. "This is just the beginning," Elena replied, her eyes fixed on the street. Temporarily safe, they realized they needed a bolder plan. The evidence had to be revealed immediately to put Victoria under pressure before she had time to react. Using remote access to the police station's server, they managed to send the files to several trusted media outlets, this time with secure copies and evidence of Victoria's direct involvement in corruption and intimidation. The next morning, Riverside was shaken by the news. Newspapers and television stations broadcast documents, evidence, and anonymous testimonies on a continuous loop. Internal forces, taken aback, began launching emergency investigations, and Victoria, for the first time, seemed unsettled. Marcus and Elena watched the scene from a safe vantage point. The risk was immense, but for the first time since the beginning of their struggle, they had the advantage. Victoria could still strike back, but public opinion and internal justice were beginning to turn against her. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and tension. The game wasn't over. He knew the final act, the final confrontation, was approaching, and that Victoria would do anything to protect herself. Riverside was in turmoil. The media had published all the evidence compiled by Marcus and Elena, exposing Victoria Hayes's schemes and her web of corruption. Internal investigations, now under public pressure, had begun targeting all the officers involved, including Victoria herself. Victoria, isolated and cornered, called an emergency meeting with her closest allies. But she knew it was too late. The evidence was irrefutable, and her authority was crumbling under the gaze of the public and her military superiors. Meanwhile, Marcus and Elena, still safe but vigilant, watched the situation unfold from a discreet location. They had managed to remain anonymous, but they knew that Victoria would soon discover their identities. Then came the decisive moment. Internal forces arrested Victoria for questioning, and formal charges were filed against her for intimidation, tampering with evidence, and obstruction of justice. For the first time, she felt fear and a complete loss of control. Marcus felt a mixture of emotions, calmed anger, intense satisfaction, but also a quiet sense of relief. His career had been destroyed, he had lost his bearings, but he had exposed the truth and restored justice. Elena, at his side, smiled at him in mutual recognition. The city of Riverside began to see changes in the police and military, audits were launched, procedures reformed, and a clear message was sent: no one, even at the top, was above the law. For Marcus and Elena, this was not only a professional victory, but a personal one as well. They had faced danger, defied corruption, and survived a direct confrontation with a formidable adversary. Their alliance, forged in the heat of battle and danger, was now unbreakable. As the sun rose over Riverside, Marcus looked at the horizon and whispered, "Justice has a price, but today, it has triumphed." Elena nodded, and together they knew that, despite the scars left by this battle, they had changed the course of history. And for Marcus, it was the first time in a long time that he finally felt free, in control of his life and his choices.